All right, very quick remarks from President Joe Biden discussing what exactly was in the relief bill. Very quick, concise, and to the point. I want to bring in now Jason Johnson, MSNBC political contributor and host of the new podcast, A Word with Jason Johnson, and Aaron Haynes, editor-at-large for the 19th. Aaron, I want to start with you. That was a very quick, concise statement from President Biden. What he did not talk about is the discord on Capitol Hill with the failure to include minimum wage and his position on that. Do you think that there is a possibility that minimum wage could be reintroduced in the Senate somehow?
Well, good morning, Tiffany. Good to be with you. And these are certainly the conversations that are happening for all the things that President Biden said that the country is now one step closer to with the passage of the pandemic relief package while we were all asleep last night. What we're not one step closer on just yet is a $15 federal minimum wage. And that was something certainly that a lot of progressive Democrats were pushing for. A lot of the activists that I spoke to in the story that we have up right now on 19thnews.org about what is in this package, particularly for women and for marginalized communities that have been on the front lines of this crisis from both a public health and an economic standpoint, right? Like, this is what they voted for, electing President Biden, Vice President Harris, and many of those Democratic members of Congress for, is to pass legislation that is going to give them relief even in the midst of this pandemic, but also as we look ahead as a country to this new normal. And so while there's some options on the table outside of this pandemic relief package to continue, I think what a lot of folks see is momentum on this $15 federal minimum wage. It is looking unlikely with the Senate parliamentarian ruling that is something that's going to make it into the Senate version of this pandemic relief package. But you know, what I'm hearing from the folks that are pushing for this is that the fight for the $15 minimum wage is not over with the fact that it may not make it into this pandemic relief package.
Jason, I want to turn to you because the filibuster is the thing that is going to continue to be a problem. And President Joe Biden has said that he will not nuke the filibuster. He doesn't support it. But that's going to impact a lot of Democratic policies. Do you think the filibuster lives throughout the 117th Congress?
You know, when Joe Biden talks about he doesn't want to break up the filibuster in the same way that he doesn't necessarily want to expand the courts, it's kind of like somebody saying, I want to lose weight, but I don't really want to hit the gym and I don't want to eat any better. The only way that Joe Biden is going to pass his agenda is if he encourages the Senate to get rid of the filibuster. Joe Manchin says he doesn't want it to happen. Kristen Sinema is trying to do her political flex and say that she's in favor of some sort of 8th grade version of high school civics. But at the end of the day, as long as Republicans can just put down a piece of paper and say, I don't like this piece of legislation, and force 60 members to have to vote for something in order for it to pass, larger parts of his legislation will never get through, which ultimately will prevent him from maintaining the majorities that he has. So I really think that Joe Biden needs to be much more progressive about this. He needs to be much more practical about this, because if he doesn't do something about the filibuster, and again, I say this all the time, he's got to expand the courts as well, because even legislation that you pass is going to run up against Donald Trump's nominees, all these unqualified people he put throughout the legal system. Joe Biden's agenda is going to be dead on arrival, and I don't think he wants that.
Yeah, we'll have to see what happens. Aaron, I'm going to bring it back to you. You cover the vice president. They were both obviously creatures of the Senate, but the vice president more recently. As we learn more about what her portfolio will be, do you think that she will play a role in encouraging perhaps President Biden to support nuking the filibuster, or will she bring the progressive caucus along to more of a centrist standpoint?
Well, Tiffany, you know, I'm not want to do a lot of predicting these days in our politics, just given how unpredictable everything is. But what I will say is that in the month-ish or so that you have seen the Biden-Harris administration begin to take shape, you've seen Vice President Harris already playing a role in the Senate, not just as a tiebreaker, but as somebody who says that she wants to work to build the consensus that President Biden has said that he wants to bring back to Washington, meeting with bipartisan lawmakers, not only in Congress, but also from across the country, governors, mayors, to try to garner support for pandemic relief and their other priorities as they continue to move forward with their administrative agenda. But look, I think, she certainly is somebody who, when I interviewed her earlier this month, spoke with a sense of urgency about the need to pass this bill. She is not somebody who was willing to take the $15 minimum wage off the table, and so I think, going forward, she, her portfolio at this point, she said she wants to be a full partner with President Biden. He said that is what he wants. And so, the two of them have largely been in lockstep on a lot of issues. It'll be interesting to see if that is the case going forward on issues like the filibuster. So we'll have to wait and see.
Jason, Congressman Jared Golder and Kurt Schrader, both Democrats, voted against this bill, and it has very little support on the Republican side. As we look ahead to 2022 midterms, this is a pretty popular bill, and people have voted against it. What do you think the consequence will be as we head back to the ballot box in just under 2 years?
So as of right now, we don't know what things will look like 8 to 10 months from now. I think Democrats are generally going to be in a good position in 2022 because we will have handled COVID much better as a country by then. The economy will doing better. So they should have the wind at their back. But the biggest problem that the Democratic Party has as a whole is you got people who don't want to act like Democrats. I talked about Kristen Sinema and I talked about Joe Manchin, who are on the Senate. When you look at the House, right, this bill only passed 2019 to 2012. Right? Because you had Golden, because you had Schrader. Mind you, Schrader is the person who voted against increasing checks from $600 to $2,000 last time. Schrader is the guy who argued in a caucus meeting that they shouldn't impeach Trump twice and that it was a lynching. And people like, hey, how can you compare a white nationalist to the sort of perpetual systematic destruction and death of black people? So Schrader is a problem. I think the Democratic Party as a whole needs to really think about who these people are who still have D's on their chests, but don't necessarily have Democratic policies in their heart, and whether or not you can primary these people or bring them into the fold, because it only takes a couple of more moves from people like Schrader, from people like Sinema, from people like Joe Manchin before some other important piece of policy disappears. It's the $15 minimum wage this time. What happens in the next disaster? What happens in the next judicial hearing? What have we seen so far in some of these appointments going on? The Democratic Party needs to whip their own party into shape if they want to actually act like the majority that they and black people on the ground fought so hard to create.
I want to play this sound from a minority leader, Mitch McConnell, on the passing of the COVID relief bill. Oh, I'm sorry. There is no sound. I'll read it to you. In 2020, he's saying that Congress passed 5 COVID rescue packages, and all 5 were completely bipartisan. He says tonight House Democrats snapped that bipartisan streak. They jammed through a bill that even liberal economists and editorial boards say is not well targeted to this stage of the fight. This is Mitch McConnell, who just recently said that he would again vote to support Donald Trump. So take that with as much credibility as you can give him. But the truth is the GOP bill that they put forth did not have any money for state and local jurisdictions. So, Aaron, what does that say about Republican priorities when it comes to their policy on Capitol Hill?
Well, again, Tiffany, I think this is why you have President Biden and Vice President Harris focus so much on, kind of a new definition of bipartisanship, right? Like not just focusing on Republicans in Congress, but focusing on the support for this bill, which you talked about at the beginning of the show, the overwhelming support for pandemic relief that crosses party lines, because, the reality is that there are millions of Americans, whether they ever get sick or not, who are being impacted by this pandemic from an economic standpoint. Many of them women, many of them people of color, but also many of them living in red states as well. And so, those, I think, are folks that the Biden-Harris administration is listening to and attempting to respond to, and understanding that is another meaning of bipartisanship. That is, this pandemic relief is something that he does believe that Americans are uniting around and are expecting their federal government to respond to.
Yeah, and a lot of this money, I keep saying this $1,400 is going to get eaten up by overdraft fees, late fees on bills. So this really isn't a stimulus, Yeah, the urgency is absolutely dire at this point. So, Jason Johnson, I am not asking you, I'm telling you to cancel your plans after the show because we're going live. I know you told me you're busy after the show. Come on Instagram Live with me after the show. No, it's not a question. I'll see you at noon. Aaron,
I get shamed like this, so I will see you.
Thank you. Thank you.
You might as well go and get in the IG. You're very fancy today. You might as well join Tiffany.
You have your fancy new outfit on. So let's talk about. You can talk about your podcast.
I didn't wear a tie, so I know I'm going to hear that on IG.
Exactly.
Yeah, we'll
and we can talk about your new podcast. Exactly. Thank you, Aaron and Jason.